The first stage begins with emotional distance, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet space. At the beginning, an avoidant person feels a strange sense of calm. The tension that built during the relationship slowly disappears. Their mind tells them they finally have room to breathe. There are no expectations, no difficult conversations, no emotional weight pressing on their chest. To them, the decision feels logical. It feels necessary. They convince themselves that walking away protected their peace. For a short time, this belief feels solid. Their mind focuses on the idea of freedom. They spend time alone. They reconnect with routines that feel safe and familiar. Work, hobbies, small distractions fill their days. This stage can last for days or even a few weeks. It looks like they have moved on quickly, but what appears strong on the outside often hides something very different beneath the surface. Avoidant personalities protect themselves by pushing emotions away. Their brain is trained to minimize vulnerability. When feelings become intense, their instinct is to shut the door on those emotions. So, during this early period, they rarely allow themselves to think deeply about the connection they left behind. Memories are pushed aside. Thoughts are redirected. They focus on independence because independence feels safe. Their nervous system relaxes when closeness is no longer present. For a while, silence feels comfortable, but the human mind does not stay in that state forever. Time changes emotional patterns. When the noise of distraction fades, quiet moments appear. During those moments, small thoughts begin to return. Nothing dramatic at first, just brief flashes of memory. A familiar place, a song they once heard with you, a random thought while driving or walking alone. These thoughts come without warning. They do not stay long, but they appear often enough to plant small seeds in the mind. This leads to the second stage. Curiosity begins slowly. Avoidant individuals rarely dive directly into their emotions. Their mind approaches feelings cautiously, almost like testing the temperature of water before stepping in. At first, the curiosity is subtle. They might wonder what you are doing now. They may question whether you moved forward or whether your life continued normally. These questions do not come from a place of immediate regret. They come from the natural human response to absence. Silence creates space for imagination. When someone who was once part of daily life suddenly disappears, the brain begins filling the empty space with thoughts. What are they doing now? Are they happy? Did they forget about me? Questions like these appear quietly in the background of their mind. During this period, avoidant individuals often observe from a distance. They might glance at social media. They might notice a photo, a post, or a small update. These actions are rarely obvious. They happen quietly, not because they are ready to reconnect, but because curiosity is beginning to wake up inside them. Psychology explains this shift clearly. Human attachment does not disappear instantly. Even when someone runs away from emotional closeness, the bond that formed during the relationship still exists in the brain. Neural pathways connected to shared experiences remain active. They may stay quiet for a while, but they do not vanish overnight. As weeks pass, memories become more detailed. Moments that were once ignored begin returning with greater clarity. The brain starts reviewing the past in fragments, a conversation, a laugh, a time when things felt peaceful and easy. These fragments appear randomly throughout the day, sometimes while sitting quietly, sometimes when they see something that reminds them of the past. Now, another psychological process begins: reflection. Avoidant individuals rarely process emotional experiences during conflict or pressure. Their minds need distance before reflection becomes possible. Once enough time passes, their brain slowly begins to analyze what happened. This stage does not happen quickly. Avoidant personalities move through emotions slowly because their natural instinct is self-protection. They review events carefully. They question decisions. They replay moments in their mind, trying to understand whether the distance they created truly solved the problem they felt before. During reflection, the mind becomes quieter. The sense of certainty they once felt begins to soften. The breakup that once seemed clear now looks more complex. They start remembering both sides of the relationship, not only the moments that felt overwhelming, but also the moments that felt supportive and safe. This internal shift creates emotional tension. On one side, they still value independence. Personal space still feels important. But on the other side, the absence of connection begins to feel noticeable. The balance inside their mind starts to move. Avoidant individuals often struggle with this inner conflict. One part of them values distance. Another part begins recognizing the meaning of what they lost. Because these two feelings exist at the same time, hesitation appears. They think about reaching out, then quickly stop themselves. They wonder if reconnecting would bring comfort or pressure. Fear still plays a role here. Vulnerability feels risky to them. Emotional closeness requires openness, and openness is something their mind has learned to avoid. This is why many avoidant individuals remain quiet during this stage. They observe, they think, they analyze. Yet, the emotional bond continues to grow stronger in the background. The brain slowly shifts from relief to awareness, from certainty to questioning. And once questioning begins, the mind becomes more open to emotional truth. The absence you left behind slowly becomes real to them, not as a dramatic feeling, but as a quiet awareness that something meaningful is no longer present in their life. Conversations that once filled their days are gone. Familiar messages no longer appear. The rhythm of connection disappears. And when a person finally notices that absence deeply, the next psychological shift begins. The mind stops pushing the past away. Instead, it begins turning toward it. This is the moment when emotional resistance weakens and genuine feelings begin rising to the surface. The distance that once felt safe now begins to feel unfamiliar. The quiet that once brought relief slowly starts carrying a different meaning. Not pressure, not panic, but the first signs of missing someone who once mattered. As this quiet awareness grows stronger, another internal change begins to form. The mind can no longer treat the past connection as something distant and unimportant. Instead, it starts placing emotional weight on memories that were once ignored. Certain moments begin to stand out more clearly. Small gestures, calm conversations, the feeling of being understood without needing many words. These experiences slowly rise to the surface of their thoughts. For someone with avoidant tendencies, emotional realization rarely arrives in a sudden wave. It builds slowly, piece by piece. At first, it may appear as a simple thought that repeats more often than before. They might remember a peaceful evening, a supportive message during a difficult time, a moment when life felt balanced and stable. These recollections begin to create a different picture in their mind. The relationship is no longer remembered only through moments of pressure or conflict. It begins to appear as something that once brought meaning and stability. The brain naturally reviews past experiences when enough time has passed. Distance changes perspective. When the intensity of emotions fades, people often see events with greater clarity. For an avoidant person, this distance removes the emotional tension that once made closeness feel overwhelming. Without that pressure, the mind can examine the connection more honestly. This is where the deeper stage of reflection begins. They start questioning whether their decision truly solved the discomfort they once felt. Life may continue normally on the outside, but internally, a quiet comparison takes place. They compare the present moment with the emotional environment that existed before. Sometimes they notice that something meaningful is missing. This realization does not always appear as sadness. It may feel more like a subtle sense that something valuable once existed. The absence becomes noticeable in everyday situations. Certain experiences feel less complete. Conversations with others may not carry the same familiarity. Familiar routines continue, yet they lack a particular emotional warmth that once existed. Human psychology explains this clearly. When people lose a meaningful connection, the brain begins evaluating its importance over time. During the early separation period, relief and independence dominate the emotional landscape. But as weeks or months pass, the mind gradually shifts toward emotional evaluation. It asks deeper questions about meaning, compatibility, and emotional safety. For avoidant individuals, this process can feel confusing. They once believed distance was necessary for peace. Yet now, the calm they expected does not feel entirely satisfying. Their inner world becomes more thoughtful. They replay certain memories, analyzing the tone of conversations and the feeling they had in specific moments. The mind often focuses on moments when they felt accepted without pressure, a time when they were able to be themselves without fear of judgment. These memories carry emotional significance because avoidant personalities value emotional safety even though they struggle to stay close to it. When they remember feeling understood without being pushed beyond their limits, those moments gain importance. As this realization grows, the emotional distance they created begins to soften. Thoughts about the past connection become more frequent. Sometimes they appear during quiet evenings, sometimes while observing everyday situations that remind them of shared experiences. During this stage, another psychological force begins working quietly in the background. The human brain naturally attaches meaning to familiar emotional bonds. When that bond disappears, the mind tries to understand why it mattered. This understanding often develops slowly. Avoidant individuals may not openly express their feelings, but internally they are processing more than they show. They may start noticing how certain qualities of the past connection were rare. Patience, understanding, a sense of emotional stability. These qualities become clearer once the mind compares them to other interactions in daily life. The brain begins recognizing that the emotional balance they once experienced was not easily replaced. This awareness creates a deeper internal dialogue. They may question whether they reacted too quickly when things felt overwhelming. They may wonder if there were ways the relationship could have handled differently. These thoughts do not always lead to immediate action, but they open the door for a new perspective. With time, the emotional barrier that once protected them begins to weaken. The strong need for distance slowly transforms into thoughtful curiosity about the person they once left behind. Instead of focusing only on independence, the mind begins acknowledging the value of connection. At this point, feelings that were once pushed away start becoming easier to face. The idea of emotional closeness no longer feels as threatening as it once did. Their nervous system has had enough time to settle, which allows them to view the relationship through a calmer lens. As this shift continues, the memory of your presence begins carrying a different emotional tone. Instead of reminding them of pressure or responsibility, it starts reminding them of warmth, support, and shared understanding. These feelings do not arrive dramatically. They appear quietly and grow stronger over time. The mind gradually accepts something important. The connection they once stepped away from may have held more meaning than they realized at the moment they left. This realization does not immediately lead to action, but it creates emotional openness. The inner resistance that once blocked these feelings slowly fades. Once that resistance weakens, the mind becomes more willing to revisit the possibility of communication. The idea of reaching out no longer feels impossible. Instead, it begins to appear as a question that quietly waits for an answer. And when that question continues to appear again and again, the emotional process reaches a point where curiosity transforms into something deeper, a desire to reconnect with what once felt genuine and real. As this desire to reconnect quietly grows, another emotional transformation begins inside them. What once felt distant now starts to feel familiar again. The memories that return are no longer random flashes. They become clearer and more detailed. Certain moments replay in their mind with surprising warmth. They begin remembering how comfortable it once felt to share daily life with someone who understood them. For someone with avoidant patterns, emotional awareness often arrives later than expected. Their mind needed distance before allowing these feelings to surface. Now that enough time has passed, their inner world begins responding differently. The connection they once stepped away from starts appearing more meaningful than they realized in the past. During quiet hours, thoughts about the past connection return more frequently. These reflections are not always dramatic or intense. Instead, they appear calmly, almost like gentle reminders. They remember conversations that once felt simple and natural. They recall how certain problems became easier when they were not facing them alone. These recollections slowly create a sense that something important was left unfinished. Human emotion naturally moves toward understanding. When a meaningful bond ends without clear closure, the mind continues searching for answers. Avoidant individuals are no exception to this process. Even though they once created distance to protect themselves, their emotional system still carries the memory of closeness. As the mind reviews these experiences, another realization quietly forms. They begin noticing how their life feels different without the presence that once shared it with them. Certain situations that once brought comfort now feel incomplete. Daily routines continue, but something subtle seems missing. It is not always obvious to others, yet inside their thoughts, a comparison is constantly taking place. They start noticing how certain qualities of the past relationship created emotional balance. Patience during stressful days, understanding during difficult conversations, a sense of calm that came from knowing someone cared about their well-being. These qualities slowly become more valuable in their memory. Avoidant personalities often struggle to recognize emotional support in the moment it is happening. Their instinct to protect personal space can make closeness feel overwhelming while it is present. But when enough time passes, their mind begins appreciating the stability that connection once provided. This growing awareness can create a quiet feeling of longing. Not a dramatic emotional storm, but a steady recognition that the past relationship carried something meaningful. They begin seeing the connection through a different perspective. Instead of focusing only on the moments when closeness felt intense, they begin remembering the moments when the relationship felt peaceful and safe. This shift in perspective changes the way they think about the person they once left behind. Your presence begins appearing in their mind as someone who brought stability rather than pressure. The emotional meaning of shared experiences becomes clearer. When the brain reaches this stage, curiosity often turns into emotional motivation. The idea of reconnecting slowly becomes more realistic. They begin imagining what it would feel like to communicate again. Sometimes this thought appears unexpectedly during quiet moments. Other times, it appears when they encounter something that reminds them of the past. At first, they may hesitate. Avoidant individuals tend to move carefully when emotions are involved. Their instinct still encourages caution. They may question whether reaching out would reopen complicated feelings. They may wonder how the other person would respond after so much time has passed. Despite this hesitation, the emotional memory of connection continues growing stronger. Each reflection adds another layer of understanding. They begin recognizing that the person they once stepped away from offered something genuine, something stable, something that made life feel easier during certain moments. Over time, this recognition becomes difficult to ignore. The mind naturally moves toward resolution when an emotional bond remains unfinished. Thoughts about communication appear more frequently. They may imagine sending a message or starting a conversation again. This stage often develops slowly. Avoidant personalities rarely rush into emotional decisions. They observe their feelings carefully before taking action. However, the emotional barrier that once kept them distant continues weakening with every passing reflection. The mind eventually reaches a point where the idea of reconnecting no longer feels threatening. Instead, it begins to feel like a possibility worth exploring. They start considering what it would be like to speak again, even if the conversation begins with something small. Often the first step is subtle. It may not look like a grand gesture or a dramatic apology. Instead, it may appear as a simple message, a brief comment, a quiet attempt to open the door to communication again. This careful approach reflects the way avoidant individuals handle emotional situations. They test the environment slowly, observing whether the space feels safe. If the response feels calm and understanding, their willingness to communicate begins growing stronger. Behind that small action lies a long psychological journey. A journey that began with distance, moved through reflection, and eventually led to emotional recognition. The mind that once protected itself by creating space now begins understanding the value of the connection it left behind. And when that understanding becomes clear enough, the person who once walked away may find themselves moving gently back toward the connection they once thought they needed to escape.